It is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Reverend Karen Russo. Reverend Karen Russo is the award-winning author of The Money Keys. With her background as having a Columbia University MBA, being a corporate leadership trainer, and an ordained Centers for Spiritual Living minister, Reverend Karen shares from decades of insight and experience in both the secular and spiritual realms. After training with Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith at the Agape Center and the Holmes Institute, she served for over 10 years at New Vision Center in North Phoenix. Today, she works with spiritual seekers and business owners throughout the world who want both spiritual inspiration and practical tools to live with more peace, freedom, and abundance. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Karen Russo.
Service, it's giving and receiving. Let's explore even more deeply the benefits, the outcomes, the results of being of service so that you can be even more inspired and committed to this powerful spiritual practice. I'm Reverend Karen Russo. I'm so grateful to Reverend Sherry McCreary and the whole Creative Living Fellowship community for having me here today with this really important message, simple and I think really important. How do we enjoy being of service as both all of the things that we give and the things that we receive? And I'm going to begin by sharing with you a story that really is one of my seminal experiences of being of service. I began my earnest spiritual journey over 30 years ago, and I was introduced to a power greater than myself by confronting a seemingly hopeless problem in my life, which was my own alcoholism, my own addiction. And so I began finding a higher power in the recovery tradition. And one of the beautiful and really mystical things about the recovery tradition is this combination of recovery. You know, the individual admits powerlessness and discovers a surrender to something greater. Unity, that the benefit of the group and the whole is valuable and necessary, and service. That's the third principle of recovery, that one alcoholic addict, one individual helping another is essential for our individual and collective well-being. And so I was pretty early introduced to the concept that being of service would be good for those that I would serve or help or guide or participate with, but that also it would be good for me. So early on, this is early 1990s, I was a few years sober, and I was also just beginning my exploration of the science of mind teachings at the Agape Center in Los Angeles. And I also had one driving life problem that I was happy to share with passersby, dry cleaners, every practitioner I would sit with after a service at the Agape Center. And that life problem was that I was alone, that I did not have a beloved. And, you know, for me, it was, where's my boyfriend? And I had just enough recovery and spiritual awareness to realize that if all I thought about was where's my boyfriend, that I would not be accessing the infinite realm of potentiality, of love and abundance and possibility and contribution that was all around me. And so this was Christmas Day, 1993 or 4, somewhere in there, and longing for a boyfriend and having a full life with service at my spiritual community and active in my 12-step meetings. It was Christmas Day, and I needed to get out of my head of loneliness and into something greater. And it came to me to be of service. And so that was the day that I found, and this is the 90s, so it wasn't like we were on our phones in our hands all the time. Through a series of investigations, I discovered that there was a church community at the Venice Beach that was doing a large event to benefit people in the community. I made my way to Venice Beach and signed in to be a volunteer and was very quickly directed to the clothing giveaway. And what commenced that day was a transformation of service as a spiritual practice. So I got immediately excited about pallets and pallets of clothes that needed to be sorted and handed to hundreds and hundreds of people who had lined up to gratefully receive the gifts that were being given. And I spent hours that day, not just handing out clothes, but I would make eye contact with a woman in the line, and I'd ask her a little bit about, like, what are you looking for? I used a little of my Spanish, Señora, ¿qué ropa para usted? And I would discover, like, what were they looking for? What did they need? I'd find things that of a color and a cut, especially for the women and the kids, and climb over all these clothes and find things that were just perfect and lovingly give them to the person, let them hold them up. One lady came back, something didn't work, and it was captivating, exhausting, interesting, human, and it was exactly what was needed, not for the people receiving the clothes, although I'm sure they benefited, but for the heart of this young woman who was so self-consumed. For me to spend hours in love and creativity and generosity for others, I was transformed. I went home exhausted, but I had that beautiful surprise moment where I realized I was not thinking about what I didn't have all day long. I went home grateful and humbled by all of the clothes in my already, at the time, professional closet, and also deeply grateful for the resources and supply and privileges of my own life, and deeply grateful for the realization that love and connection are not dependent on a particular form of relationship. So something in me changed because I had been of service. So that's the invitation for us today, is I'm asking for you, how can you let service transform you? And in particular, we're going to look at what happens when we give up control and receive a sense of freedom. What happens when we give in to the truth of who we are and receive and tune into the grace of the Holy Spirit? And finally, when we give of ourselves and we receive the call of now for you and I to be of service. And so that's what I'll ask you is, take a moment, and this might even be the mudra that you will place your hands into, but for you right now, what is the important question or opening for you? Creative Living Fellowship is in a time of change and transformation. Many individuals and families and businesses and communities and nations in this world are in a time of transformation. There are myriad opportunities of people and situations that have a call of need. What is yours? What is yours to contemplate and open to right now? And with that in mind, let's discover for you, what can you give in service and what will you receive? And so we'll begin with this idea of spiritual deepening being about the release of control. And as I said, I came up in the recovery tradition, and I remember this wonderful speaker. She said, "We don't give up control. We give up the illusion of control." The illusion of control. And that stayed with me for decades. Control, the idea that we can manage people, places, and things, or circumstances, or outcomes to get what we think we want. We all know that control, it's painful because it's hard to sustain for any period of time. It's exhausting because if you're trying to control things, you have to control the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And it's spiritually kind of empty. Like, if all we can get out of life is the best of the things we can want and imagine, there's just a natural limitation that is very discouraging. So, what is the limiting idea, insufficient desire? What is the box that you are willing to release? What is the emptiness of control that would be welcome to be given up right now? And I'm going to emphasize this with a story about my dear friend, Paul Raci. So this is Paul Raci in Sound of Metal. And I'm so emotional about this, and this will really date this talk. It's March 2021. My dear friend Paul Raci, I met him in those early 1990s, and we did all of our Science of Mind training, including our practitioner training, during that time in Los Angeles. And Paul is an actor. He's also a child of deaf adults, a CODA, C-O-D-A, and has always been a big advocate for inclusion and diversity in the arts, because Paul's a musician who does sign language in his musicianship. And as a journeyman actor, he's done theater in Chicago and Los Angeles. And you've probably seen him in some little bits in television things along the way. But Paul, in 2019, had a break to do a movie. And he got a role of a lifetime. He got a role of a lifetime at 70 years old. And he's just received an Academy Award nomination for his role in Sound of Metal. It's a great movie. I definitely recommend it. But what I'm so touched about is that for years, and he would tell you this himself, and he certainly has in all his interviews, for years, he tried to think about getting a break in a certain kind of way. And when he gave up control of his career and how it would turn out as a character actor in this movie, they wanted a name. They wanted a name actor who they would teach sign language. And Paul Raci and his agent heard about the opportunity. They gave up control, but they did ask for what they wanted, which was give him a chance. Paul was made for this role. And by him doing this movie, which had a small budget, he could have made more money if he stayed in Burbank and did interpreting at the local court where he does gig work. But he went to do this movie, to be of service, to be inclusive of the deaf community, which is featured in this movie in a really beautiful way. And what he received is a sense of creative freedom and really a blessing for all of us. This is also, being of service in your work, in your career, and in your gifts and your artistry. It can really be a way to honor God and to be a beneficial presence for all of us. And I, of course, love any story that is it's never too late story. So, just so you all know, as I was yearning for a boyfriend for all those years, at 40, of course, I met the big fella, and I'm happily partnered today. And all those years, those 40 years in the desert, why did I worry so much? It wasn't necessary. But it's never too late for the thing that you desire, especially if we give up the control of how it is to come. So giving up control. The next piece is giving in. And this is something that Reverend Sherry has just such a beautiful theme throughout this series is dare to release, she said, dare to release who we think we are, the limitations of the past, the small ideas. And she really emphasized that when we give in to the Spirit of God, the nature of life itself, that we heal the sense of separation. Our service becomes an act of unity. She also really emphasized, let compassion guide your service. Compassion for ourselves and compassion for others. So I encourage you to let your questions about where you're to serve be guided by spiritual practice, prayer, visioning, meditation, fellowship, chanting, journaling, and always include, this is a guidance that's been very helpful to me, always include the agendaless spiritual practice where you are going into spiritual practice to discover that which you did not even know you were looking for. And at this time in our calendar year, we're about to come into the Easter season, and you'll be getting wonderful messages about the metaphorical nature of Easter for whether you are relating to the Christian tradition or whether you're more of a spiritual and metaphorical person who practices. Easter is a story for all of us. It's the story of the betrayal of the flesh, the human condition, the crossing out, the crucifixion, the death of our sense of separation. And then Easter has the surprise rebirth, the miraculous emergence. And there's a wonderful reading from Dr. Howard Thurman called The Glad Surprise, which is the part of the Easter tradition. And that's what I think of when we give in to who am I in God? What is the God idea of who I am? What's the generosity or the power, the creativity, the joy, the abundance, the beauty? What is it in me that is longing to emerge that will surprise me? When we give in to God's idea of who we are and how we are to serve, we're often transformed and surprised. And that was Dr. Michael Beckwith teaching. All true transformation is a surprise. So what is the surprise in you that's longing to come forward? And so that leads us into how do we give of ourselves? So take a moment and just feel, if I gave up control and really embraced a sense of freedom, I was in the present moment, not bound by my past, not beholden by any limited idea, and I was free to discover this moment, and I completely gave in to the truth of who I am in God, then I give of myself and ask, what would be calling you to serve? What are the topics, the opportunities, the subjects, the places? What is calling you? And where are those places? Sometimes our call of service is a right where we are type call, like right here, right now, how am I called to serve? And sometimes the where is surprising. In the last few years, I've been called for spiritual service in the political arena in ways that I didn't quite expect. I got inspired to stop yelling at the TV. It actually doesn't work that well to get change. And got active in campaigns and causes and things that inspired me. And I brought that minister's heart, even if I was doing something that seemed very material. So where is it for you? And especially now, where is it for you? And then how? How are you called to serve? And particularly if you're activated by the Creative Living Fellowship community, how are you to be of service to Reverend Sherry, to your practitioners, to your leaders, to your community? How are you to be practically of service and then service in consciousness? And then the who. Who are you to be in service? And who is it right now who could benefit most from your prayers? The call for you, if you listen and you attune to it, that call will lead you not just to be of maximum benefit to others, but it will lead you into a deeper discovery, a deeper communion, a deeper joy of discovering who you are. And what I know about you and what I know about me and about all of us, Creative Living Fellowship, our beautiful valley, our nation, all nations, our world, all beings, what I know about us is that we are fundamentally made in the image and likeness of something magnificent. And so when we serve the one, we serve all. How can service be a giving and a receiving for you? So let us take this into our prayer. We'll do a spiritual mind treatment together. So I invite you to soften the eye and open the heart. And let us pray. Let us recognize that the infinite presence of God is a giving and receiving system, a infinite, creative, ever-expanding, ever-giving, ever-loving vitality of joy and abundance and wholeness, of freedom and truth and beauty, of love and right action and grace. God gives as it is, and this giving is through, in, and as me, Karen. I remember myself, that I am a child of the infinite, a vehicle for God's expression, one with the one. And because this is true of all, I am honored in this moment to include all beings, all peoples, all beings in this prayer. I recognize and celebrate all who touch into this prayer in consciousness, all who are touched by the Creative Living Fellowship community. And I also expand my love and respect and appreciation for all who seek a deeper experience of the divine in whatever form and path and method that they choose. Recognizing our oneness with love, it is an honor to speak this word. And what I accept is that our deepening in service is a blessing to all. I claim that we are guided and led to places of service where our giving is generous and our receiving is gracious. I bless the Creative Living Fellowship community, Reverend Sherry, all practitioners, leaders, community members, and beyond. I know that service is the guiding beacon of light for this beautiful community navigating through change and transformation. I name it good. And I bless all leaders and peoples and citizens. I extend this sense of love and harmony and unity to all. And I just bless any place where an uplifting of light and service is called for. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful because this prayer is an act in consciousness. Consciousness is creative, and the law is saying yes to us now. So we release this prayer, trusting the law to say yes. We know that as it's spoken, it is done. And we honor this by saying together, and so
So
it is.